Hello everyone. Welcome to the first of our three-part webinar series, exploring Japan's best-kept secrets, Japanese gardens. I'm Aki Nakanishi. I'm the Anish Unita Curator of Culture, Art and Education at Poland Japanese Garden and the Japan Institute. And I'm actually speaking to you live from my Cambridge University dormitory room, actually, in England, where I'm currently conducting my PhD research in the field of Japanese landscape designs and philosophies, believe it or not. And like I said, this Cambridge dorm room is being linked with Japan's ancient capital, Kyoto, where Steve Beimel, our presenter this evening, has been based for the past 50 plus years, actually. And of course, there's still a great Portland connection here in this webinar because our operation team is actually sitting in Portland right now, making all this a reality on a global scale for all of you tuning in live. And this webinar also marks the very beginning of Poland Japanese Garden's formal partnership with Japan Craft 21. And Steve will be walking you through what the organization does and how it operates both nationally within Japan and internationally. But let me just say, Japan Craft 21 is one of the most powerful dynamos that I've ever seen in my life within the field of Japanese cultural preservation that doesn't just talk, but also walks the walk, embodying Steve's action-oriented philosophy and vision for keeping intact what humanity has nurtured through generations so we can pass on the treasures of craftsmanship to the next generation to enjoy and learn from. So I'm simply feeling blessed that through this partnership, we are embarking upon this journey together. And I'm truly grateful that all of you are being a huge part of it by tuning in real time right now on this precious Friday from wherever you might be joining us from. So thank you so very much for choosing to spend your time with us. Now, like I said earlier, this is a three-part, actually monthly webinar series. And we have very aptly actually chosen the first topic of the series to be the Japanese garden. And I can't wait to get the ball rolling, actually. But as your moderator, I have to quickly share a couple of housekeeping notes. Let me just make sure what I'm saying. Okay, so one is that we will have time for Q&A towards the end of the program. So you can either ask questions then, or you're welcome to use the chat box down below at the bottom of the screen to post your questions as we go along. And second is that this video will be recorded for later sharing and viewing. And that's going to be uploaded upon Poland Japanese Garden's YouTube channel in a couple of weeks' time. And I think there's probably a YouTube channel link in the chat box right now, so you can bookmark it for easy reference later. Anyhow, without further ado, let me present one of the most revered Western speakers on Japanese socio-cultural landscapes, our dear friend, and who has actually been to Portland Japanese Garden for the first time. I think what he just shared with us, that was like 35 years ago. Maybe one of the discerning audience members this evening or today may recognize him from that time. Well, our very special friend, Mr. Steve Beimel. Take it away.
Thank you, Aki-san. Thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be with all of you today. Going to go right to my screen here. So we are, as Aki-san said, we are Japan Craft 21, and we are an organization working to save the master craftsmanship of Japan, which is a powerhouse for the world. If you look at all the master crafts, when I say master crafts, I mean crafts which have been passed down for centuries, sometimes over 1,000 years. If you put all those crafts that are honed and refined, and some take maybe 7 to 10 years of training to learn how to make, if you put all of those that exist in the world on one side of the scale, I venture to guess that Japan has as much, or at least as much as the whole world put together, or even more. So it is the world's powerhouse of craftsmanship. And it's one of the world's greatest secrets because very few people are aware of this. If you look, though, at 1979, there were 300,000 actively working Japanese master craftsmen. And today there are about 50,000 left. And of those, half of those are my age. They're in their 70s. So we estimate that in the next 4 years, we're going to see a drop to about 20,000. This is a meltdown of one of the great cultural assets of the entire world. So a number of years ago, we got together and a number of us felt we had to do something about this. So we started programs, we created a mission, and we don't do a lot of symposiums and we don't do a lot of discussion groups, but we identify problems, we create strategies, and we take action. Even if it's a small thing, we want to get things done, and that is our mission. Looking at the understanding of Japanese gardens, it is such a pivotal area in culture of our world. Why that would appeal to a revitalization organization like ours? Well, so much of a Japanese garden, building and maintaining a garden, depends on extraordinary craftsmanship, from steel forged shears to garden tools, wood joinery, mud walls, stone cut monuments, et cetera, et cetera. So in our organization, we support craftspeople. We have an apprentice program. We have a contest where each year we choose 10 master craftspeople to support, to promote, and to create a community of really forward-looking people. And part of our outreach is to tell the world about the wonders of the Japanese craft world, to tell the world about the best kept secrets that we all need to know about, because this is not just Japan's. This, as members of the Japanese Garden of Portland, you realize that this belongs to the whole world, this methodology, this culture. So we begin with the Japanese garden, and this is where I think I began my whole love affair with Japan, was with the Japanese garden. But if you look, you think about the gardens of the Romans, the Egyptians, the continental Europeans, they were making gardens that looked like humans designed them. But why did the Japanese make gardens that looked like nature? And why would you have a garden like this right next to nature? It didn't compute with me for a long time. And then I realized that the Japanese are not looking to just simply create a landscape in their backyard. The Japanese garden is seeking perfection. It's an ideal of something that we can all work towards, something that is even more beautiful, more perfect than nature itself. Nature has weeds and it has broken branches and has dead things, but a Japanese garden is impeccable and it raises our spirit. So today we're going to look at history. We're going to look at different types of Japanese gardens, the basic elements in a garden, concepts. And we're going to come back to the same garden here, Tenyuji, because this garden seems to encompass all of the things we will be talking about. And I want to point out a term which I call point of engagement. When you notice something, you become present, you become mindful. And the more of these points of engagement you can have in a short period of time, the more mindful your experience will be. And the Japanese garden, as Japanese landscape, and so much in the Japanese culture, seems to be designed to bring us more mindful. And so we'll be talking about this. The word for garden in Japanese is made up of two kanji characters. One is te, which represents the wildness of nature, and represents that aspect of the garden which is man's touch, human's touch. So it has a wall around it. There may be pastoral elements, a fence, fruit trees, et cetera, et cetera. So you put those two things together and you get teien, which is the Japanese garden, wildness of nature plus the involvement of the human being. Originally, Japanese Shinto shrines and Japanese gardens were basically areas of gravel. places of divine space where people would come to pray. There were no, before the Chinese influence in the 500s and 600s, there were no buildings in Shinto shrines. They were just natural places. There could be a water element, place to commune with the Shinto gods, to pray, to give thanks. Across the Sea of Japan in China, we had a very developed culture for thousands of years. And from 2,500 years ago, the Chinese were Taoists. And Taoists are always searching for immortality. They believe that off the coast of China, the East Coast, were islands of paradise, born on the backs of huge sea turtles. They were the most exquisite places that, with ponds, with waterfalls, with beautiful animals. And they believe that immortal beings would fly back and forth from the Chinese mainland to these islands and on the backs of white cranes. And the Chinese were looking for these islands, sending out expeditions, just like the West, we were looking for El Dorado. They were looking for these 5 islands, and they could never find them. So they decided 2,000 years ago, if we can't find those islands and those immortal beings, let's create exquisite scenes of nature in our own backyards and bring the immortal beings to us. And that was the beginning of the Chinese garden. The Japanese went to China 500 years later, 600 years later, and they saw these gardens, and they brought it back to Japan, and they placed it into the imperial palace, and they combined it with the sense of divine space that you see with the sand and the gravel, and they created the hybrid of Japanese garden. Japanese took what they could from the Chinese, but for the next 1,400 years, they were developing and refining through trial and error. And this is a big thing. This is very much Japanese, to improve by trial and error. Initially, when you see the landscape which inspired the Japanese gardens, initially it was the Chinese landscape which inspired the Japanese. But eventually, they began to look to their own natural scenery, their own mountains and rivers, their own waterfalls to inspire the gardens. And so the gardens more and more over time began to look very much like Japanese landscape. So there are 6 kinds of Japanese gardens that we will speak about. Beginning with the scroll garden, which is meant to be seen from inside of a building, preferably about 6 feet back from the veranda, not on the veranda, but back 6 feet back, so you can look at the garden through the frames that these posts create. Framing is very important, and the concept is 10,000 trees at one glance is what it's called. So you see everything at once, and people do not walk in these gardens except for maintenance. So it's almost like an altar in a sense, a place. It's like a place where you can gain from viewing. You gain a sense of fulfillment, upliftment. In contrast, we see the strolling garden, which takes us from one environment to the next, and it's a kind of a magical mystery tour. The concept is called hide and reveal. So you see something, and then you see something else, and then something else is hidden from you, and it's always changing as you walk through. And it not only changes as you walk through, but every time you walk through, morning, noon, and night, the lighting is different, and it'll be different for you. So there'll be many points of engagement, things that you notice, things that touch you, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. The Paradise Garden, also called the Hodai Garden, sometimes there'll be the turtle and the crane story will be involved with this type of garden. But it's actually a garden like this, especially at Saihoji, is to give us a kinesthetic, visceral experience of what paradise is like. The dry garden became popular in the 1400s, and they were actually inspired by the ink paintings, Southern Sung Dynasty ink paintings from the 1200s and then in Japan in the 1400s. So you can think of a dry garden as a three-dimensional ink painting. The tea garden became popular in the late 1500s with the explosion of the tea ceremony as part of the culture of the upper class of Japan. And a tea garden will have it'll be very somber, it'll be very quiet, no flashy flowers, no no flashy views, just a place for contemplation. The pocket garden is an urban garden where there's very little land available for residential garden space. So these pocket gardens were created so people in urban areas could have a little bit of green in their homes. So we're going to go through all the basic elements of the Japanese garden, from streams to bridges to fences. The streams are very important. The water movement is evocative. People love to see the water move. They love to hear the water moving, and that can be created by certain techniques, placing stones, pebbles in certain parts of the stream. But you notice you can only see half of this stream. It extends to the entire slide, but you can only see half. And there's a concept called yugen, where when you look at the mountains and you see only half of the mountains because of the fog or the clouds, we tend to build up in our creative imagination what the mountain looks like without the clouds. And more often than not, we tend to make it more beautiful than it really is. It's an active way of enjoying a landscape, and yugen is seen all through the Japanese culture. So that in the stream, we don't see where it's all coming from, but as we walk along, we'll see other parts will be hidden and then revealed to us. People love waterfalls, natural waterfalls. People are always going to see waterfalls. There's something about the movement of the water, the sound, the atmosphere, the spray, the moisture that really appeals to people, that really touches them. And so we find these very popular parts of Japanese gardens. If you see on the left here, the waterfall has, on the left, the water itself is a very smooth sheet of water. It's called silk running over the side of a table is the technique. And it's all determined by the lip stone of the waterfall. Whereas below, the two waterfalls below are more like skeins of yarn. So you have this contrast in the nature of the waterfall itself. So a point of engagement, if you look at the right side, it's a juxtaposition. You have a stairway. You're looking at the scene, you have waterfall on one side, stairway on the other. The stairway is taking you around a corner. You don't know where it's going, so it's evocative. There's mystery there. And the fact that you have these two things in comparison, it's a point of engagement. We notice this. Another waterfall, the skein of yarn again, and the stone at the bottom is called the breaking stone, water breaking stone. It breaks the water, it makes sound, it makes it very, very interesting for us. And of course, a dry waterfall. Dry waterfalls are constructed exactly as the wet waterfalls are constructed. If you ran water through here, it would still work. You see the water goes down the right side underneath the tiny bridge. The bridge is purposely very tiny. It's very low so that the stones behind it are set up. They look much bigger and farther away because the bridge is low and tiny. Islands are very important. If you've ever moved out of a house and saw for the first time rooms in your house without furniture and how small the house looked, how the rooms look so small in comparison, the same thing is done with a pond with an island. If you place an island in the pond, it looks much bigger. Stone placement is probably the most important job of a garden builder. Only the most qualified people will ever set stones. You know, the stones are similar color, texture, shape, and even though these stones may have come from many different places, they were chosen for their compatibility, and they're buried up to 50% into the ground. So no matter what kind of flood or earthquake there is, the stones will be there for almost forever. Tea houses have the function of being a kind of pavilion in a garden. So when you look at the tea house, again, much of it is hidden by foliage, but you see a rustic tea house in a garden, and it takes us away someplace. You see, it's like a rustic hut in the mountains, and it just takes us away to a far off place. When Katsurariki was built, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people living in the city. Yet we could go to a garden like this and be taken away to a remote place to rejuvenate our spirits. Bridges are very important, again, in a garden, and the best place to view a garden with a bridge is from the side of the bridge. So when you see the side of the bridge, you know that is a viewing point. And everything in this garden is pointing us to this area beyond the second bridge. And so what is beyond the bridge? There, again, there's mystery. We don't know what's there, but our heart goes there. We want to know what's there, and our imagination becomes very full. So rather than showing us everything, they show us very little and let us build up the details in our imagination. Stepping stones are a tool to take us from one environment to another. So if you look at the way these stepping stones are placed, there's a random sense about this. There's a spontaneity about this. And it's very contemporary. It looks very much like it came from the 20th century, yet it's 400 years old, this playfulness in the placement of the stepping stones. So stepping stones, which are natural stones as this, are more informal. Cut stones like this are more formal. You will place stepping stones like this. This is from a historic building which was torn down, but the term mitate is used to take something that's old and place it in a garden as a kind of historic continuity. So you have the old stones in the new garden. Gates are very important. They tell us so much about the site. And even though this is a very, very high level, in society, this is an imperial villa, the gate is very rustic, which tells us a lot about the Japanese culture. The higher the level, the more rustic the presentation will be. Fences are found throughout gardens, and especially natural fences like this became popular through the influence of tea and the great tea master Sen no Rikyu in the late 1500s with Sukiya-style architecture. These natural fences, there are dozens and dozens of variations. There's so much variety using these natural elements, and a very high level of craftsmanship to produce a fence of this level. Japanese are great wall builders. This particular wall is a mud wall, and broken roof tiles were set into the wall to create this beautiful motif. If you've ever looked at a painting, a Chinese, a Korean, a Japanese painting of landscape painting, you'll always see a little tiny woman and man maybe walking up a hill, someone on a boat fishing, a little hut. And even though these parts are very tiny parts of the whole composition, these, by seeing something human in the painting, it gives us permission to our imaginations to see ourselves in the picture. It's a portal. And so in a garden, in a scroll garden, you will often see things like bridges or water basins, wells, water wells. Here's a boat stone. It's shaped like a boat, so we see ourselves boarding the boat and riding down the stream. Japanese lanterns are seen very frequently in Japanese gardens as a human element. There are 250 styles of these lanterns, and they're functional. You can light them at night. Important part of the Japanese garden is that the posts of the house support the roof, so you can remove the walls. The garden and the house become one. You're not trying to look at a garden through a tiny window. The garden and the house is one unit, and this is very important. And this inspired the 20th century concept of floor-to-ceiling windows. We think of that as a very Western thing, yet it's been in Japan for hundreds and hundreds of years. Verandas connect the house with the garden. So when you look at the house, you see the veranda looks like it's part of the house, but when you're in the house and you're looking at the garden, the veranda looks like it's part of the garden or a bridge to the garden. It connects again the garden and the house into one unit. So dimensions of the garden, especially when we're speaking about scroll gardens, can intensify our appreciation and promote intimacy. If you sit on the veranda on the left side, pretending that square is a garden, that garden, because it's a square, it will not be nearly as powerful, as effective as if you brought the backdrop of the garden closer to the veranda. So it was very wide, but not very deep. It's like focusing in with a lens of a camera. It brings everything in tighter and closer together, making the view much more intense and powerful. That's why you'll see scroll gardens are invariably very wide and not very deep. You'll see this in contemporary architecture as well. This was designed by Hiroshi Sugimoto, the famous photographer, architect, entrepreneur. And this is a restaurant in Tokyo. It's a very wide garden, but it's very narrow. It's not very deep. So it has the same effect, floor-to-ceiling windows. So you don't need a lot of decorations in a room like this when you see a garden like that. Framing is very important because it heightens our experience, intensifies our focus. If we're standing on a mountain and we have a 180-degree view, our eyes are going all over the place. They're dotting here and they're darting there. But if we look through a camera, we suddenly start seeing exquisite views one after another. And that's what framing does. It lets us see the world through 60 degrees. Everything becomes intensified. So if you're sitting on the veranda, your view will not be nearly as interesting as it would be by sitting inside and looking through the frame. Transitions are another point of genius in the Japanese garden. In a formal site, in a garden site, you'll often have a formal area and a semi-formal area and an informal area. But the transition creates many points of engagement. And I'm going to go through those with you right now. These are things that you may notice consciously, or subconsciously. And if you're not having a conversation with someone when you walk through, you'll notice more. Or if you're speaking with someone about what you're seeing, you will also have those points of engagement. So on the right side, there's a wall. On the left side, there's a wall with hedges. There's a contrast there. It's a point of engagement. We turn the corner. The stepping stones change in size. We go from a wide area to a narrow focused area. We see something different. The sides are different. We have trees on both sides, so another point of engagement. There's a shift inside of us. We see something closer. We turn the corner, another view. We walk closer, then we go from narrow to wide. We go up a step. We go into a darker place through the gate. These are all points of engagement. We see something new closer. We go closer, and then we turn again, something new, more points of engagement. We walk along this corridor, which is somewhat undetailed, and that lack of detail causes a subtle sense of monotony, making us think we're walking farther than we really are. And then we turn, we see something different. We go from a shady area to a dappled shade and sun. We go closer. We go through the gate up the step. We turn again, something completely new. We go again. And then we end up in the informal area of the garden. And of course, when people walk through there, they don't have me whispering in their ear what they're seeing. It's all very passive, and they're just walking through, enjoying it. But if we ask them the next day how long it took them to go from point A to B, they'd probably think back and say, oh, that took about 10 minutes, but it actually took just about a minute and a half. Scroll gardens have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And this is about 400-year-old technique. It reduces the unnecessary refocusing of the eyes. If your eyes are going far and near, it's very tiring. But if what they do in a scroll garden is, more often than not, they will have most of the attention will go to the middle ground. The foreground is gravel, and we don't really pay attention to the gravel. Our eyes quickly go to the middle ground. The background is pretty nondescript. There are no aesthetically pruned trees, and they're just roof tiles. And of course, if you grow up in Japan, roof tiles will not be very much of interest to you. You'll just look at this area in the middle here, the middle ground. And this is the Garden of the Leaping Tiger at Nanzenji Monastery in Kyoto. So you sit on the veranda looking through the frame of the posts, and you view this garden, and you have the freedom from having to refocus your eyes. The scroll gardens have various backdrops, and this helps to define the site. So here we come back to Tenryuji, then we have the natural backdrop. So the shrubs are very, let's say they are very carefully pruned near us, but the farther you go deeper into the picture, the less trimming is done until it blends right into the mountains behind. So you can't tell where the garden begins and nature begins. It's all one. In a scroll garden such as this, the perimeter wall makes it very clear what they want you to be looking at. This is a very intense focal point in these stones. So this is where our eyes are taken. In this particular garden, you'll notice that the walls are white, and this is reminiscent of the ink paintings from 12, 13, 1400s. from which these gardens were inspired. In those paintings, the peaks of mountains are bathed in fog and clouds. So when you have this white behind there, it's reminiscent of those wonderful ink paintings. Now, this is a pretty small garden, which it looks like a very big garden because the forest next door is beautifully incorporated into the garden. And you just see this hedge that goes from left to right there, which is the official demarcation. But because it's so unobtrusive, we take in the whole picture and think that this garden goes on forever. In this particular background, you'll see there, because there are many buildings and walls in the area, in order to make a very simple statement, contrasting the green with the gravel, they have 3 layers of background of hedges, and 2 of hedges and 1 of trees. So there's no competition between the background and the installation, nor is there the distraction of having to see buildings. Vectors are very important in that they move our eyes in a very natural but effective way. Now, if you're looking at this waterfall, it looks like it's been there forever. It looks like it's a natural waterfall that you find in the wild. But if you analyze it, you'll see that the stones are placed in a way to create a lot of stability in our consciousness. So we see the stone on the right goes at an angle, and you see the arrow, and the arrow peaks at about where my cursor is. The stone on the left goes at an angle, and it meets it point up above, and then the water goes down, creating a pyramid. And of course, in our unconscious, the pyramid is one of the most solid images that we could have. And so when we look at this waterfall, the solidity, the stability of this waterfall tells us this has been here forever. Same thing we see with these bridges. When you have these monument stones on both sides of the bridge, and when you ever have a vertical element like this stone here we'll look at this one on the right, and the bridge comes out from it, our eyes will naturally go out to the left. And we have these 2 stones in the far bridge. Our eyes go from left to right to right to left. They meet in the middle. They create this wonderful focal point beyond the bridge and give us the sense that these bridges have been here forever. We have this scene here at the Silver Pavilion in Kyoto. The trees in the background are shaped like arrows going up. They're pines, they're cedars. The trees in the middle ground are red pines, and they're flat, and they take our vision from left to right. And then we have this sculpture, the sand sculpture, which takes us deep into the scene, and it creates a kind of a cathedral effect. And guess what we have here at the Portland Garden? We have the exact same thing. I remember when visiting 30 years ago and seeing this and just falling in love with this view, because it does the same thing. That has the expansiveness, the sense of being in this amazing natural cathedral. Stone arrangements are the topic for a full hour. I'm just going to touch very, very quickly on this. There are a number of different patterns. Oftentimes the patterns will be sets of 3 stones. In this case, there's a very large stone, there's a flat stone, and then there's a medium-sized stone. And so human beings tend to anthropomorphize when they look at stones, and we tend to, it's not uncommon to see this one on the left as being great and grand, having great integrity and leadership and wisdom. And the flat one we think of as being nurturing and peaceful. And you have these two stones together, and they really contrast each other. Without the other would make a much weaker image, but you have them both together, they set themselves off. And then the third one has kind of neither the grandeur of the big rock or the stability of the small rock. It's more like the human being with all of our foibles. So these rock sets have many names, and sometimes it's called heaven, earth, and man. Sometimes it's called yin and yang. And you notice in this picture, the stone to the left and the main stone are facing in different directions, and it gives a really nice kind of a tension there. If they're all facing in the same direction, it would be a very different feeling. So there's a lot of variation possible. In this scene here, in the far right, you see a very large stone in the corner, and this is what you could say you might say it's the master stone, and there are two stones below it which seem to be bowing to it. I mean, again, we tend to anthropomorphize, but they seem to be having a relationship. All the stones in this arrangement somehow relate to that first stone set. Stone placement is all done intuitively, and it's based on many, many years of having been someone's apprentice, and someone will say, turn the stone here, turn the stone there, while they're setting the stones, and they learn how to do it with their bodies. It's not an academic or a theoretical study. It's all done by many, many years of physical labor, and then it becomes intuitive. Aesthetic pruning is another topic. It's for a full hour, but we'll just speak about one tree here. Pine trees are the favorite tree for Japanese gardens because they're so versatile. They can be beautifully aesthetically trimmed, and the trimming of them not only allows us to see the exquisite structure of the tree, but it allows us a sense of transparency. We can see through the tree. We can see, so unlike a tree which is fully grown without pruning, which creates a kind of dark claustrophobic feel in a small space. By having in a small space, you can open it up and feel much more expansiveness by pruning the tree. And invariably, they will prune the lower branches off. Anything hanging down from the branch will be pruned off. Anything dead will be removed. Any crossing branches will be removed. And the foliage itself will be thinned out so that the sun can come through and things can grow beneath the tree. A very popular style from about 400 years ago would be to trim shrubs in geometric shapes. For example, you have these round tuft-like balls, or you up the side, you'll see these square step-like shrubs. Here you have a number of shrubs together, which are, you place 5 or 6 shrubs and you let them grow together and you trim it as one unit. So Japanese are masters of giving us the sense of expanded space. So of course, borrowed scenery does this. The hedge there allows us to take in the background very, very intuitively, very naturally. Here we want to screen out buildings and give us a sense of intimacy. So you can either let the background in or keep it out. Transparency and layering is a wonderful technique of taking a small area and making it feel really big. Now, if you see the tree we're looking at, if that was just on a lawn with nothing else around it, nothing else between you and the tree, it would seem very close by. But you have all the layers of the frame you're looking through. You have the tatami, you have the edging of the tatami. So it's 1, 2, 3 here. The fourth layer would be this doorway, another tatami, 5, another edge, 6, another tatami, 7, 8, 9, 10, another portal, and then the veranda, and then the foliage. So there's so many layers between there. It makes this really small space look big and far away. And it's frequently used in traditional architecture. Same thing with the pond here. You have a layer of water. You have a layer of stone, another layer of water, more stone, more water, more stone, and then the area of mystery beyond there, which because of all the layers seems far away. And it adds to the mystery. The distance adds to the excitement of wondering what's beyond there. You see this in the Portland Garden, of course, not only with the layers, but the way this curves around, the pond curves around, gives it more of a sense of intimacy, more of a sense of mystery. So you have the foliage, the water, more foliage, the bridge, and then what's beyond there. Imagine you're sitting on a stone bench under a wisteria trellis, and you're looking at this stream, which seems the waterfall in the distance seems very far away, but it's actually not very far away at all. Because there are 3 waterfalls, you have that added sense of layering. The water in the waterfalls you have layering. You would intuitively, we would think that the stream was shaped like a rectangle and parallel, but it's actually, they use forced perspective, and they made it a triangular shape, even though we don't really realize this. The zigzag of the stream gives a sense of greater distance and depth. And also the fact that the stream undulates, it goes from wide to narrow, it makes it seem farther. Then the stones A, B, and C are not the same size. A and B are large. C is purposely a smaller stone. So when you look at this, you assume that this is very far away. So the stone seems smaller. The low bridge makes the arrangement behind seem very large. The small, these are very small dwarf trees, but we assume that they're fully grown, they're very tall, so it makes the gold pavilion look very large in the distance. So we return to Tenryuji, and we see all the things that we've spoken about. We see the borrowed scenery. We see the dimensions are very wide, but not very deep. We see the reference to sand as a divine space, a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Manipulation, the stone size. So a lot of the stones in the back area are actually smaller than we would suspect, just to give you that sense of distance. If you look at the right side, the shoreline has very few, you can barely see any stones at all at the shore. So you would say, well, it's so far away, I couldn't see the stones. If the pond was shaped like this, it would seem very small indeed, but it's shaped like this. So it has an undulating shoreline. There are islands, there are peninsulas. The water goes around corners, so we don't know where the water's going to. So there's mystery there. And then there's a variation in the shorelines of plants, of grasses, of stones. So it's broken up and makes it seem larger. And then we have framing, and framing makes that big scene much more digestible when we see the focal point of this garden with that area behind there. We see the very low bridge, the human element. We see the tall dry waterfall behind it. The low bridge makes the waterfall look very big. This area where my cursor is the land of the immortals. In every view we look through, we see a beautiful, exquisite, framed view of the garden. So we took a look at history. We took a look at the different kinds of Japanese gardens, the basic elements, and the concepts and techniques. And we came back to Tenyuji to bring it all together. Japanese gardens are what we saw today was just like a little tiny door to a very, very wonderful journey of understanding. So we've just this is just the beginning of understanding the Japanese garden. I hope you took away something today that that you could take with you, maybe some tools for understanding, and maybe to encourage you to take that next step to look a little bit deeper, because it's like Narnia. It's like the witch's wardrobe, where you go into the tales of Narnia. You go into this magical world and it just keeps going on and on forever. So thank you very much.
Whoa. Whoa, Steve. Thank you so very much for the, oh my God, tour de force of presentation on Japanese garden within mere 49 minutes and 30 seconds. I mean, honestly, that was one of the best presentations I've ever seen given by anyone actually on Japanese gardens. Thank you so very much. You only came from your more than half a century of experience having lived in Kyoto. We could really feel your passion, and it's because you speaking from your first-hand experience, having visited all these different places and having this acute sense of place for those stunning gardens. I think you were able to definitely convey the very essence of what makes those places so very special, Steve. So thank you so very much. Now I think we have a number of questions to get to. So if you are okay, kind of regaining your breath again.
Sure, I'm ready.
Yeah, because I think there are a lot of keen audience members here wanting to ask many questions. So I've been fielding some interesting questions actually from the chat box. Beginning with this one here. I don't know who asked this question, but are those gardens designed hundreds of years ago still kept in the same gardens, including the raked sand and stone gardens?
Yes, for the most part. Of course, the stones don't change. The plants will change. The plants will grow, and they will grow through their life. And it's up to the gardeners to maintain the plants in a way that maintains the integrity. But it's just naturally going to change over time. The raking of the garden, usually it's pretty much the same, but there are a number of examples. There are many exceptions to that, where someone has come in and redone a garden and changed the way the raking was done. But once it's set, it's usually continued for a long time, the raking style.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Quickly moving on to next one. Yeah, this person is asking about fostering the next generation of gardeners and landscape designers. Is a career as a professional Japanese gardener, is that appealing to young people nowadays in Japan?
Well, this is a big reason for Japan Craft 21, because we're seeing a lot of disruption in Japanese culture because of all the competition of the internet, of telephones, of mass culture, of the whole world converging. So young people are, the Japanese culture used to have mechanisms in place to draw young people into certain professions, and those have pretty much, they're disappearing. So I think there's an interest, what we are doing in Japan Craft 21, not just with gardens, but in general with, we have an apprentice program where we're trying to attract apprentices to different professions. And it's still in its infancy, but it's it's very, to answer the question, it's very challenging right now, but there are ways of answering the challenges, and we're hoping to at least make somewhat of a contribution in that.
Yeah, one of the biggest and pivotal reasons why we are forming this formal partnership between Poland Japanese Garden and Japan Craft 21. I think we do share a lot of things in common, actually. Even though we are geographically very much separated, there's a clear vision that's shared by both of the organizations. So I very much look forward to working more closely with you guys. There's one more question, actually, kind of relating to starting up your own garden in your backyard. So it goes like this: if you need an if you want to build a garden, Japanese garden of your own, is there a way to get started in a simple yet effective way? Can you give this person any advice?
Well, I think it's a great thing to make an effort to do that. It's a great learning experience. Excuse me. But and remember that the Japanese garden developed over 1,400 years, plus the time that was developing in China. So we're looking at 2,000 years of development. You should really do your homework. Getting help from a mentor would be really very, very I think really important. It's keeping it really simple, not try, sometimes just at your doorstep, your entryway, you just have a few things. You begin with just a few things next to your door. You take a class in aesthetic pruning. You just have one aesthetically pruned tree. Keep the ornaments at a minimum. And I think that that would be my suggestion. But it's building a Japanese garden. It's almost like, well, how can I heal my cousin of his back pain? I mean, you really have to study. You have to practice. You have to learn. You need mentorship.
Like everything else in life, I guess. Yeah. Well, I am being mindful of everyone's time here. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, people are willing to and wanting to learn more about this, at their own pace as well, reading books and stuff. So this person is asking, what book helps to continue this conceptual vocabulary that you, Steve, have given them? Any, yeah.
There's a very good publication, very small circulation in the States called the Journal of Japanese Gardens, or Sukiya Living. And they have short articles on Japanese gardens and trimming techniques, and they're all short articles, so it's very digestible. So I really like, I've been subscribing for a long time. I used to do tours for that magazine years ago, and it's a good start.
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, so again, being mindful of everyone's time here. There's just one sort of burning question from me to you, Steve, but I'd like to ask if you could also weave your answer into your kind of final thoughts and kind of remarks before concluding this session, that'd be great. So my question to you is, as a Japanese garden aficionado yourself, are there anything that you particularly look out for whenever you visit a new garden to really try to take everything in? So that becomes advice to anyone watching this program, and for anyone to stumble upon a new Japanese garden that they haven't been to, what would one look out for?
That's a really good question. I've led a gazillion garden tours, and so there are a few points that I would suggest to people over and over again. One is take a sketchbook and sketch, because this more than anything else, this will kinesthetically anchor that information in you cellularly. You will take it home with you. Photographs are fine, but those sketching the right, you don't have to make artistic drawings. You can just, the way a rock rock arrangements, certain things, sketching. Number two is when you walk through a garden, either walk through it, if you're walking with friends, make an agreement that we're going to have some silent time, because you can't be talking about your trip to Tuscany as you're walking through the garden and see anything. But if you walk through with people and you talk about what you're looking at, that really brings it alive. So that's something I would really suggest. But I always look at the maintenance. Maintenance is a really important thing. Look at the way the trees are maintained, the trimming, the way the rock arrangements, how one rock face works with another. So you just look at all the elements, but just be really mindful. Sometimes I will talk a little bit out loud because and I'll just comment to myself as I'm looking at things, and it keeps my mind very focused. So those are the things I would suggest, but just be present there and let the garden speak to you, because it has a lot to say.
I'm sure everyone just loved the way you dissected all the design elements as well. I just wasn't aware just how much ergonomics and behavioral science were kind of built into those garden designs. So yeah, that was,
and this is just part one
a real eye opener.
This could be a part, it could be 5 different.
Right.
I mean, we just began.
Exactly. This is just a teaser, right? And yeah, I just want to thank you, Steve, for your gung-ho zeal that really carries through this virtual auditorium as well. So the next one is slated for Friday, November 8th. Steve, would you like to give the audience some taste of what to expect?
Sure. I'll come back to my screen here. Easier said than done. Yes. So the next presentation will be on Japanese crafts, and what we're doing is we have 10 different crafts, and one of which is ceramics, and of course ceramics is huge. So of that we look at celadon. So we look at what was made traditionally and which is still being made here. This is still being made today, but this is what contemporary artists are doing with celadon. So what we're doing, so we look at Japanese urushi lacquer and what was traditionally done and what contemporary artists and craftspeople are doing. And we as I said, 10 different versions. So you not only see what was traditional and what you may be seeing in a Japanese restaurant in your neighborhood, but you get to see what the best and the brightest of artists are doing in Japan right now, and they're wowing the world with their brilliance. Wow.
So in short, it's going to shed amazing light on the cream of the crop of Japanese crafts in general.
Exactly. And it's just scratching the surface because there's so much to show, but we show a little bit of each craft.
So the next one, November 8th, that's I guess US time, and I think the audience members are seeing the link to the program right in the chat box. So please do try to sign up and pencil that in your calendar. And of course, in the meantime, if you are lucky enough to be in proximity to our garden in Portland, do consider visiting the garden to immerse yourself in the amazing fall colors that are captured in some of Steve's photographs, actually photo images. The whole garden with very invigorating touch of autumn. So along with the fantastic exhibition, by the way, I got a mention of kintsugi, the world of gold joinery for broken ceramic pieces. The exhibition is also taking place at the garden while you are there. Oh, and last not but least, please do give us extra few moments after the program for a brief program survey so that we can keep improving these programs for you and for your communities. With that, Steve and everyone, along with the dedicated staff from Japan Craft 21, the staff members are actually located in Tokyo and Okayama respectively. So along with Kyoto, we are truly becoming a multi-location based program, right? Well, thank you so very much for making this all possible, and I will see you next time, okay? Thank you so very much, Steve. It's so appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.